G'day guys and welcome to Aussie English. My objective here is to teach you guys the English spoken down under. So whether you want to speak like a fair dinkum Aussie, or you just want to understand what the flippin' hell we're on about when we're having a yarn, you've come to the right place. So sit back, grab a cuppa and enjoy Aussie English. Hey guys, welcome to this episode of Aussie English. Today I'm going to talk to you about place names and how to pronounce them in Australian English. And the first episode we will start with is going to include the primary states and territories in Australia. So we have 6 main states: Tasmania, Victoria, New South Wales, Queensland, Western Australia and South Australia. And then we have 2 territories, which are the Northern Territory and the Australian Capital Territory. So, how do we say these different states and territories in Australian English? I'll start with the states and I'll leave some space after each state that I repeat a few times in order for you to be able to practice the pronunciation of these states and territories. I'll enunciate them well first and then I will say them using my standard Australian accent. So Tasmania, 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 Tasmania. And I don't think this one really changes when I use my standard Australian accent. It's just Tasmania, Tasmania, Tasmania. And then we have above Tasmania, which is located in the part of Australia that is in the most southeast. It's the small island off the southeastern coastline of Australia. And the next state is Victoria. Victoria, Victoria. And again, like Tasmania, this one doesn't really change in how I would pronounce the word. Victoria, Victoria, Victoria. And Victoria is the state that I live in, and it's the second smallest state in Australia, just bigger than Tasmania. And the next state is New South Wales. New South Wales. This is 3 words. New South Wales. New South Wales. And again, this one doesn't really change. New South Wales, New South Wales, New South Wales, New South Wales. And New South Wales is located to the north of Victoria, again in the southeast of the country. And above New South Wales is one of Australia's largest states, the second largest state, Queensland. 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 And that's one word, Queensland. And so if you were to say this with an Australian accent, the pronunciation of land would become more of a lund. So you would just say Queensland, 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 Queensland. So that A sound kind of gets just turned into that neutral vowel sound in English, the The next one is South Australia. And that's to the left-hand side of New South Wales and Victoria on the mainland. It's at the bottom centre of Australia, South Australia. South Australia. South Australia. And again, I don't think this one would really change too much. It would just be South Australia. South Australia. So I probably change the way that I say Australia, and I would say more South Australia. South Australia. South Australia. Western Australia is to the left-hand side of South Australia, and it is the largest state in Australia, taking up almost a third of the main continent of Australia, the mainland of Australia. Western Australia. Western Australia. Western Australia. And this one, I would change the pronunciation of both Western, and I would say Western, and Australia, again like South Australia, would be said Australia. And so when I use my accent, I would say Western Australia. Western Australia. Western Australia. Western Australia. So they're the 6 main states, and then we have 2 territories. And the first one, and the largest territory by a long way, is the Northern Territory. And this is above South Australia and between Western Australia and Queensland. So, Northern Territory. The Northern Territory. The Northern Territory. The Northern Territory. And I think because it's a territory, we use the word the before Northern Territory. We would never just say Northern Territory like we would say, I'm going to Queensland or I'm going to Victoria. If you were to say the territories, you would probably say, or you should say, I'm going to the Northern Territory, or I'm going to the Australian Capital Territory. So that the has to be put in there. So how would Northern Territory change? Again, like Western, turning into Western, I would say Northern, so that just turns into an n sound, Northern. And territory, in Australian English at least, just becomes territory. Territory. So to say Northern Territory, in normal Australian English, I would pronounce it Northern Territory. Northern Territory. The Northern Territory. The Northern Territory. The Northern Territory. And that leaves the very last territory, which is the smallest out of any of the territories or states in Australia. It's absolutely minute, and it's actually within New South Wales, the state of New South Wales. So it's just above Victoria's eastern side, and it's at the bottom southeast of New South Wales, and it's called the Australian Capital Territory. Also referred to as just the ACT, so we just use the letter at the start of each word. Australia, A, capital C, territory T, and it becomes just the ACT. The ACT. The ACT. The ACT. But if I say it in well enunciated English, it would be the Australian Capital Territory. The Australian Capital Territory. The Australian Capital Territory. The Australian Capital Territory. And then if I change this and use my more Australian accent, it would be Australian Capital Territory. Australian Capital Territory. Australian Capital Territory. Australian Capital Territory. The Australian Capital Territory. The Australian Capital Territory. The Australian Capital Territory. So there you have it, guys. That's the first of hopefully a few episodes where I will go over different place names for states, territories, towns, cities, and even national parks and other locations in Australia, as we have quite a few interesting places and place names that have pronunciations that aren't necessarily how you would read it, and even some Australians make mistakes with certain place names that are based on, say, Aboriginal language or Aboriginal words. Even Australians make big mistakes. So it's definitely the kind of thing where it'll be useful to at least have heard how to pronounce these things if you're coming to Australia and you plan on travelling or even talking about any of these places. It's going to be good to have at least heard how to say them in the past and have an idea of it. Anyway, until next time, guys, have a good one.